It is October 2024, and nestled deep in the mountains of Kashmir, a quiet village is settling into the cold embrace of night. Inside a warm home, an old grandfather and grandmother sit by a crackling fire, their grandchildren gathered close around them, soaking in the heat of the flames. The children, restless and curious, look up at their grandfather with eager eyes and beg him for a story. The old man chuckles softly. He finds it amusing that in a world where children are glued to their mobile phones and the internet has an answer for everything, these little ones are sitting here asking him, an old man by a fire, for a tale. But the children insist. They have heard enough internet stories. Tonight, they want something different. Something real. And so the grandfather leans back, stares into the fire, and begins that he tells them about a couple, a young man named Brandon and his wife, Lisa. They had only been married a short while, but already their home was filled more with arguments than with love. Things between them were not good from the very beginning, and on this particular night, Brandon was driving Lisa to her parents' house, a journey that said everything about how broken things had become between them. The drive was tense and silent, the kind of silence that is louder than any argument. Then Brandon suddenly pulled the car over on a dark, deserted road and announced that he needed to use the restroom. Lisa sat in the car and rolled her eyes. She muttered under her breath about how they had just passed a hotel not too far back and he could have used the facilities there like a sensible person. But Brandon was already out of the car and disappearing into the roadside bushes. When he came back and tried to start the car, the engine refused to turn over. The cold night air had done its damage. Lisa's frustration boiled over. It was his fault, all of it. If he hadn't stopped, the engine wouldn't have cooled. Brandon scanned the darkness around them and spotted a house not too far away. With no other option, he took Lisa and walked over to knock on the door. An old woman answered. She looked at the two young strangers standing at her door in the middle of the night with a mix of surprise and quiet concern. Brandon explained that their car had broken down and asked if they could stay until morning. The old woman didn't hesitate. She waved them inside immediately, telling them firmly that it was not a good time to be outside at night. There was something in the way she said it, not just the words of a cautious elder, but something deeper, something that carried the weight of a warning she wasn't quite ready to explain. She showed them to a room and told them both clearly, "Do not leave this room. Go to sleep and stay inside until morning." They thanked her and settled in. But of course, Brandon and Lisa being who they were, the quiet didn't last long. The argument resumed almost immediately. Lisa blamed him for the car breaking down, for stopping in the middle of nowhere, for everything. Brandon fired back. Words flew. The old woman, exhausted, had already fallen asleep by the time Brandon had enough. He stormed out of the room and out of the house, muttering that he would rather sleep in the car than spend another minute listening to the bickering. That he walked through the cold night air, grumbling to himself. And then he stopped. Coming toward him on that empty, dark road was a young woman unlike anything he had ever seen. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her red dress sweeping the ground as she walked. Her skin was fair, her long dark hair flowing in the cold night breeze. She was stunning in a way that felt almost unreal, the kind of beauty that didn't belong on a deserted road at this hour. She came closer. Her eyes met his. And then, without a word, without slowing even a step, she walked right past him. Something came over Brandon in that moment, something he couldn't name or explain. Without thinking, without hesitating, he turned and followed her. Back in the room, Lisa's anger had slowly given way to guilt. She sat with her thoughts and admitted to herself that she had gone too far. She had said things she shouldn't have. She quietly stepped out of the room to go look for Brandon. But as she moved through the dark house, her hand knocked against a chair, waking the old woman. The old woman's eyes snapped open and she demanded to know what Lisa was doing out of the room at this hour. Lisa explained quickly. They had argued, Brandon had gone outside, and she was going to find him. The moment the words left Lisa's mouth, the old woman's face changed. The color drained from her cheeks. She grabbed Lisa and told her she had specifically said not to leave the room. But there was no time for explanations now. She pulled Lisa along and moved outside into the night with urgent, quickened steps. They searched in the darkness, calling out for Brandon, but he was nowhere to be seen. The old woman kept moving with a certainty that told Lisa she had some idea of where to look. Ahead of them, a cave came into view, dark and still. And there at the entrance, half buried in the dirt, was a single shoe. Lisa recognized it immediately. It was Brandon's. Her stomach dropped. The old woman pushed inside the cave without slowing down. And then, deep inside, they found what they were looking for, and what they were terrified to find. The beautiful woman in the red dress was still there. But she was no longer beautiful. Whatever glamour had cloaked her moments ago had fallen away completely. What stood before them now was something monstrous, a hideous, twisted creature, nothing like the woman Brandon had followed into the dark. The old woman's heart nearly gave out. Lisa screamed. And the grandfather pauses here, letting the silence hang over the fireplace, as one of the children jumps forward and asks, wide-eyed, who was that terrifying creature? And so the grandfather continues, shifting now into another story woven within the first, as if to answer the question that he tells them about two friends, Jake and Marcus, who had traveled to Kashmir to visit their old college friend, Ryan, who had settled there with his wife, Sandra. When the bus pulled into the stop, Ryan was already there waiting for them, arms open and grinning. It had been a long time since the three of them had been in the same place, and the reunion was warm and full of laughter. Ryan took them home, Sandra made dinner, and the four of them spent the night talking, laughing, and pulling up old memories like photographs from a forgotten album. The next day, the three friends went out exploring together, the valleys, the mountains, the winding roads. They did the same the day after, and the day after that. 3 full days of wandering and reconnecting. But on the morning of the fourth day, Ryan had to go back to work. He had already stretched his leave as far as it could go. He said his goodbyes with a reluctance that was plain to see, telling Jake and Marcus to enjoy themselves and not wait around for him. They assured him they would be fine on their own. That evening, as Jake rested at the house, Marcus announced he was stepping out for a cigarette. Jake declined. He was tired and content to stay behind. Marcus headed out alone into the long, winding street. The night air hit him immediately. He pulled his jacket tighter and muttered about how the people of Kashmir must be made of something tougher than the rest of the world to survive this kind of cold every single day, and then a voice answered him. She was standing at the bus stop, a young woman in a long blue dress, with hair that fell past her shoulders and a calm, self-assured presence that caught Marcus completely off guard. She had responded to his comment about the cold with a simple, matter-of-fact observation, that people who live here simply get used to it. Marcus introduced himself and tried to start a conversation, but she was evasive. She deflected his questions with a half-smile, and when the bus arrived, she stepped on and was gone before he could say another word. Marcus stood at the empty bus stop for a long moment. He looked at his phone. It was already past 6:30. He thought to himself that there was a good chance she came this way at the same time every day. And so he decided he would come back tomorrow. The next evening, Marcus arrived at the bus stop a full 30 minutes early. And sure enough, she appeared, walking toward him from down the road, and when she saw him waiting, she smiled. She told him her name was Ashley. Marcus told her his name. They began to talk, and she was warm this time, playful even, telling him she had come out that day not because she had anywhere to go, but simply to see if he would show up. Then she began walking and Marcus fell into step beside her naturally, almost without deciding to. She asked questions about his life back home, his friends, his work. She was curious about him in a way that felt flattering and attentive. But about herself, she said almost nothing, and then Marcus blinked, and he was alone. He was standing in the middle of a dark, overgrown area at the edge of the forest, with no memory of how he had gotten there. No memory of the last stretch of the walk. No Ashley. He shook himself, found his bearings, and made his way back to the house. It was already past 8 in the evening. This happened again the next day. And the day after that. And each time, Marcus would leave for the bus stop, fall into conversation with Ashley, lose track of time and place, and come back hours later with no memory of what had happened in between. And each day, he felt a little weaker than the day before. By the fourth day, Marcus decided to bring it up with Ashley directly. He told her plainly that every time they met, he would lose himself somewhere in the middle of their conversations, and when he came back to his senses, he was always back at the same bus stop with no memory of the hours in between. Ashley's expression shifted. She became defensive, even offended, asking him sharply if he was suggesting she was doing some kind of black magic on him. Then she turned and walked away, but not before telling him gently that she enjoyed talking to him and that he should come back the next day if he wanted to see her. That night at dinner, Jake noticed something was off with his friend. Marcus was visibly thinner, visibly tired. Jake pointed it out, asking where Marcus disappeared to every evening and why he came back looking more drained each time. Marcus finally told them, there was a girl. Her name was Ashley. He had been meeting her at the bus stop every evening and they would talk and walk together. Sandra, Ryan's wife, went very still when she heard this. She looked at Ryan with an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read, and then she asked, almost too calmly, whether this girl ever took Marcus to a wooded or remote area. Marcus confirmed that she did. He asked how Sandra could possibly know that. Sandra asked if anything strange happened during those meetings. Marcus described everything, the blackouts, the lost time, the waking up at the bus stop with no memory. Then Sandra asked Ryan to check the back of Marcus's neck. Ryan looked, and found 2 small marks, like bite marks, on the skin just below his hairline. The room went cold. Sandra set down what she was holding and began to explain. Kashmir, she said, is called heaven on earth, and rightly so. Its valleys are breathtaking, its mountains towering, and anyone who comes here rarely wants to leave. But beneath that beauty, among the people of these mountain regions, there lives a fear that has been passed down for generations. A fear of something called the Rantus. Marcus had never heard the word. Neither had Jake. Sandra explained that the Rantus is a creature of the Kashmiri highlands, something like a witch or a demoness, but specific to these mountains. It lives in caves in the deep forest and emerges in the form of a beautiful woman to lure young men into its trap. Once it has its target, it spends exactly 7 days slowly draining his life force, feeding off his energy gradually, so subtly that the man never realizes what is happening to him until it is too late. He simply feels himself growing weaker, day by day, without understanding why. And on the 7th day, the Rantus takes him to its cave, and kills him. The 3 of them sat in stunned silence. Then Marcus's voice broke through, quiet and shaken. He asked if that meant Ashley was going to kill him. Sandra said yes, unless they did something first. She said Marcus could not stop going to meet her. If he suddenly disappeared, the Rantus would come to the house looking for him. But there was a way to fight it. There was a way to destroy it. Jake immediately pushed back. He refused to send his friend to walk into that kind of danger. But Sandra explained that Marcus wouldn't be walking in defenseless. She told him that a Rantus could be killed with a weapon made from sandalwood. She said that the next time Marcus went to meet Ashley, he needed to conceal a sandalwood dagger on his body, and when the creature came close enough, he needed to drive it into her neck. That was the only way. The next evening, as Marcus was getting ready to leave, Sandra handed him a small wooden dagger. She told him to be brave. He nodded, tucked the dagger into his jacket, and headed out to the bus stop to wait. 25 minutes passed. Then 30. And then Ashley appeared down the road, walking toward him with the same easy grace as always. She was almost close enough to touch when Marcus moved, pulling the dagger from his jacket and driving it toward her before she could say another word. He returned to the house shaking, barely able to speak. He told the others it was done. He had destroyed the creature. But something still didn't feel right, he said. He felt unsettled in a way he couldn't explain. Sandra told him he had done what needed to be done. She told him that if he had not acted, the Rantus would have claimed him and moved on to countless other men after him. Jake backed her up. They told Marcus to rest, to recover, to put it all behind him. And they added one final warning: if any girl ever told him that she really enjoyed talking to him, he should take it as a sign. Because that is exactly what the Rantus says to draw its victims in. Marcus went quiet for a long time. Then he said he agreed. He said he had done the right thing. He stepped outside for a cigarette to clear his head. Ryan watched him go and remarked sadly that Marcus had barely arrived in Kashmir and had already been through more than most people experience in a lifetime. He doubted Marcus would ever want to come back. Marcus returned about 2 hours later. Sandra was still in the kitchen. She laughed and asked if he had gotten himself wrapped up with another girl. Marcus smiled faintly, exchanged a few words with them, and then they all went to bed. Around 1 in the morning, Jake woke up thirsty. He padded out of his room toward the kitchen for a glass of water. And in the dim hallway, he came face to face with Sandra. He started to speak, and then stopped. Something was wrong. Sandra was looking at him with a smile that was slightly too wide. And then her eyes began to glow, a deep, burning red. Her teeth sharpened. Her fingernails lengthened. And in the space of a breath, she was no longer Sandra at all. She was the Rantus. Jake barely had time to scream before Marcus appeared from behind the creature and drove the sandalwood dagger into it with a precise, powerful strike. The Rantus shrieked, a sound that shook the walls, and collapsed to the floor, writhing and twisting, staring up at the three of them with a fury that turned slowly to disbelief. Marcus crouched down and looked at it calmly. He told it that he knew what it was thinking, that it wanted to know how they had figured it out. He explained everything. When Sandra had warned him earlier that evening that if any girl told him she enjoyed talking to him, he would know it was the Rantus, Marcus had realized in that moment that Sandra herself had used those exact words to him at the bus stop. He had never told anyone that detail. He had kept it to himself. So the moment it came out of Sandra's mouth, he knew. The real Sandra would not have known that phrase. Only the Rantus would. So Marcus had quietly left the house, gone to a local spiritual healer, and learned the truth. The dagger Sandra had given him was not real sandalwood. It was a fake. The healer gave him the real one. Marcus returned to the house, told Jake and Ryan everything in private, and together they set the trap, waiting for the creature to reveal itself. And it did. Disguised as Sandra, comfortable in its deception, it walked right into its own undoing. The Rantus let out one final, blood-curdling scream, and then it was gone. The three men didn't waste a second. They searched the house immediately, and in the back storage room, they found the real Sandra, unconscious but alive, untouched and unharmed. She came to slowly, confused, with no idea what had happened or how long she had been there. The grandfather's voice trails off gently into the warmth of the fire. The children stare at him, wide-eyed and breathless, the cold outside completely forgotten. And somewhere in the silence that follows, the lesson settles in, that beauty can be a disguise, that evil finds its way into the most heavenly of places, and that the only things that can truly defeat darkness are courage, sharp eyes, and the wisdom to trust what doesn't quite add up.